everybody, this is DearMamaSal back again with a much shorter haircut. And I think I'm now totally grey. I've been sort of working towards it, but I was just checking with my stylist and we reckon there's just a tiny little bit at the back now, but other than that I've made it to the big time. The reason that I've come back to do another quick broadcast is because something came up in my discussion with my stylist, and it also came up in a broadcast yesterday. And when God gives me the same subject twice in less than 24 hours, then I reckon there's probably a reason for it. So what I'd like to talk to you a bit about is something called cardiomyopathy, otherwise known as, if I'm correct, congestive heart failure. And the reason that it came up on a broadcast is one of the broadcast viewers asked me how to live with the fear. She has cardiomyopathy and has less than, I believe, has around 40% use of her heart. And obviously it's deteriorating. And so the question was obviously, you know, how do I live without being in fear all the time? I thought that was a really brave question to ask. And a very difficult question to answer, quite honestly, because it's easy, if you like, it's easy for us to make statements on how to live without the fear. I personally know that if I had that going on in my life, I'd be living in fear as well. So the answer really isn't about how do you live without fear, how do you live with the fear is, I think, more relevant. So I have a lot of viewers who are living with conditions that are terminal. And the one thing that amazes me about each and every one of them is how they live their lives in spite of what's going on. And so what I was explaining to the viewer was, you know, live your life. Live it. Literally live. Get a bucket list going and do things on the bucket list. You know, get out and do things that bring you pleasure. And so I showed her how to take a piece of paper, and I suggested a 8.5 by 11. And you know, you just fold it in half 5 times. It doesn't really matter how big the piece of paper is. I think the maximum you can fold a piece of paper is 5 times and still get it pretty even. And then when you unfold it, you've already got the little oblongs that you can write different things in for your bucket list. And I really recommend people do this. So the other thing I said to her, which I think is terribly important, but most people forget, is that nobody knows that she will live less time than I will. So I could be living my life in fear of getting old and maybe die before her. I do know that living in fear is not healthy. Living in acceptance is different. Acceptance says, hey, it is what it is, now let me get on with my life. Because I don't know how much time I've got. Let me get on with living while I've got a chance. You know, let me do the things I always wanted to do because it may be the last chance I get. And so what I was encouraging her to do was to actually have fun. give herself permission to go do things. And she's saying it's so frustrating because I can't do housework anymore. I said, and you've got the perfect excuse not to do it. Yay! You know, so I look at it and I go, like all things in life, there is a downside, but if you look carefully, there's also an upside. If I only had enough strength to go play or do the housework, I know where I'd use my strength. It's a no-brainer for me. So I guess the thing I wanted to talk about is living in fear. How many of us live in fear of whatever it is? I live in fear of the fact I will never get married. Well, hello, live. Enjoy being single. Enjoy not having to ask anybody's permission about what you should cook tonight or trying to find out. Enjoy being single. Do things that only single people can do. There are some people who live in fear that they will never be single again. Enjoy your marriage. Do what is necessary to make it enjoyable. Treat your husband as and or wife or whatever. Treat them like you used to treat them when you were in love. And I say that I know some of you are still in love, but the reason is you probably still treat them like you are. So how do you live your life without fear? You don't. I always quote a book by Dr. Susan Jeffers, Jeffers, I believe. And she wrote a great book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And she gave some really good advice in that book on how to deal with fear. I assure you that everybody has fear. It doesn't make you a wuss. It makes you human. We all have fear. It's whether we let it overcome us. And that was the thing that the broadcast viewer was talking to me about. You know, I seem to have become overwhelmed by the fear. But when you get overwhelmed with fear, and I've been there, so I totally understand. When you get overwhelmed by fear, then what you end up doing is you end up surviving, not living. And maybe even hermitizing. You know, you stop going out, you stop doing things that are fun. Let me give you a practical example of that. You know, I've just had 2 biopsies on my back because of a mole going wrong, and it was potentially something that could lead to skin cancer. Now, do you think that I could go, oh, that's it, I can never go out in the sun again, and live in fear that for the rest of my life that every time I see the sun, such as today, you know, I've got to stay inside and not enjoy it? No, that's not what it means. It means if I'm going to go outside, at least protect my skin. Right? Wear a loose top. Don't get sunburned. Don't live in fear. Enjoy the sun safely. There's a difference in that. And I'm about to go and work on my deck, and it's pretty darn hot for British Columbia. It's all the way up to 59 degrees, which in British Columbia is summer. It's a beautiful day. It feels much warmer, I must say. So I hope this makes some sense. It doesn't matter what you live in fear of. I can remember, for those of you who are long-term viewers, you all know Manon. Manon is a broadcast viewer of ours who was taking her driving lessons for the longest time. And she really struggled. Enough that most people would have probably given up, but we wouldn't let her give up. She just wasn't quite making it in the depth perception and just understanding that sort of eye coordination, if you like, distance stuff. And we kept saying to her, you'll get it. You just have to, don't have to, but you choose to carry on until you get the right teacher who will help you with this. And then once you've got it for life. And thank goodness she did. She could have stopped taking driving lessons and lived the rest of her life in fear. But she chose to overcome her fear and now has her driver's license, and the word freedom comes to mind. So understand, it's not about living without fear. What makes life is that we live with a lot of our fear under control. As I always heard, and I repeat time and time again to people, being a professional speaker, as I was for many years, is considered to be one of the most stressful jobs in the world. And there are reasons for that I won't get into. But it's very high on the stress scale. For a lot of people, their fear is what stops them being a speaker, which is a good thing, because that's why speakers get paid a lot. So I was always very grateful that so many people were so scared of doing it. But all jokes aside, I heard a statement once that really is so true. It's not that professional speakers don't get nervous and don't get fearful and don't get butterflies in their stomachs. You bet they do. The difference is, when you're a professional speaker, you learn how to get those butterflies flying in formation. In other words, you expect the butterflies. When you get them, you deal with them. You learn little tricks on how to contain that adrenaline and use it for the positive rather than the negative. So let me just leave you with that thought. It's not about not having butterflies or not having fear. It's about understanding that fear is perfectly normal, and we all have it. And people who live happy lives control it. They don't let it consume them. Their butterflies fly in formation. This is DearMamaSal saying, thanks for watching. Bye-bye for now.